Good evening everybody, welcome to the Hero Spotlight. Today we'll be looking at one of the more underplayed classes, the Pyromancer. Now Pyro is probably the most unique of the caster classes. You use an axe instead of a hoe for starters, and this is because you are actually a melee class. While the other three caster classes rely on mobility and range to keep their enemies at bay, Pyromancer actually gets up into the fray with their axe and hacks their enemies to pieces. Their heavy sustained damage combined with the fact that they have the insane burst damage of other caster classes means that Pyromancer is a force to be reckoned with if you let them get close to you. Add to this that most of the Pyromancer's main damage abilities are AoE, meaning they're extremely good in team fights, and you have an all-around excellent class. At level 1 you start off with Chaos Orb, and unlike the other level 1 skills in the game, it cannot be considered a filler or a bread and butter skill. It shoots a fiery ender pearl that has a pretty good damage at an extremely short range on a slightly shorter cooldown than Fireball. Now the most important thing about Chaos Orb is that it is extremely difficult to land. The range is very small, so you have to be up close and personal to use it. On average, you'll only be able to throw this thing about 6 blocks, meaning its effectiveness as a gap closer is very limited. The main use for the teleportation aspect of this skill would be in fight control, staying on top of your enemies when they're a few blocks away from you. However, if you can't accurately land these things, the damage is higher than Fireball and the cooldown is less, so you'll have some pretty crazy DPS. Now Maim could be considered your filler skill. It's a melee strike that slows and interrupts your enemy if they're casting. The damage is pathetic, so its usefulness against warriors is non-existent, but it's great against casters. Level 15 you get Cauterized, and it removes fire ticks and bleeds. Very simple skill. But at 25 you get Dragon's Breath, and this skill is sweet. It's a mid-range AoE blast of flame that deals pretty good damage, but the main thing is it's distracting. The giant whoosh of flame will usually engulf someone completely and blind them for a few seconds. In addition, the damage and AoE of this skill are pretty darn good. At 25 you get Flame Shield. You turn this skill on and for 5 seconds you are immune to all fire damage. This includes Fireball, Fire Ticks, and Lava. If you know a wizard or a guy that's gonna cast a Fireball at you, turn this thing on and make them rage. At 35 you'll get the Pyromancer skill with the longest range. This is Dark Bolt. Now Dark Bolt is how you combat range classes that don't want you to get close to them and hack you apart with your scary axe. Now Dark Bolt deals good damage in a good AoE, but the skull will detonate after it's traveled a certain distance. It does not have a limited range. The withering from the skull seems to deal a dot, but it's only 1 damage a tick, which is completely insignificant. The main use of the wither is just to keep people in melee range. At 40 you'll get Dark Blade, and this is a skill that's kind of like the Dragoon's Lunar Lance in that it drains mana from your target and gives it to you. It only steals and restores 70 mana though, so it's not that much. At 45 you get a great defensive skill against melee classes. This is Curse. Curse causes half of your enemy's melee attacks for the next 7 seconds to miss, and receives a nice little message in the chat to let you know that it missed. Then at 50 you'll get Chaotic Strength. It takes away 30 of your intellect to give you 15 strength. In other words, not worth it. To combat the uselessness of Chaotic Strength though, at 55 you will get Pyro's trump card. This is Great Combustion. Great Combustion is a short range AoE stun that can only hit 1 target, but does tons of damage if you can land it. The skill is fairly difficult to use. Not super difficult, but it can be hard to use against mobile targets. Make absolutely sure that you do not cast this against someone that is hiding or running away from you. You will waste an incredibly useful skill in your rotation. It does pair very nicely with the Pyro's level 60 skill, Ender Pearls. Now wizards will primarily use Ender Pearls to escape or to get away. Pyros will mostly use Ender Pearls to get into the fight and initiate, and due to the lack of the mobility of the class, this makes Ender Pearls extremely valuable. And at level 65 you get Doom Wave. After a short warm-up, Doom Wave will unleash the fires of nothing! Seriously, this skill does nothing. It shoots a massive 2 Ender Pearls that do less damage than Chaos Orb in a completely unpredictable pattern. Don't even cast this skill. Do not waste your time with Doom Wave. Now most games have what's known as the melee tax, meaning that because you're in melee range you're going to take more damage, you'll in turn do more damage, and this is especially prevalent with Pyro. Your standard burst rotation of Great Combustion into Chaos Orb, into Dark Bolt, into Dragon's Breath will usually deal about 6 to 7 hearts. When fighting other melee classes, the key thing to know is pressure. Keep the pressure on your targets because you as a Pyromancer will do far more damage than they will. Use Great Combustion whenever you know that they don't have their interrupt ready. Use Chaos Orb as soon as Great Combustion goes off, and then follow with a Dark Bolt and a Dragon's Breath if they are still in the stun. Continue to pressurize them with melee attacks, keeping on their target the entire time. Try not to let them get too far away from you. And Chaos Orb whenever you can for that little extra damage. Fighting ranged classes as Pyro is very different. The key thing you have to know is to never let up. You want to open with some Ender Pearls, get some melee attacks off as soon as you can, and try to land that main. The slow is going to be invaluable in keeping them in range. Cast Dark Bolt whenever you can, again, keep them in melee range. Dragon's Breath has deceptively long range, so if your enemy's at mid-range and you can't melee attack them, a Dragon's Breath is a great way to do it. If your enemy's, again, in Dragon's Breath range, a Chaos Orb can use to close the gap, but nothing farther than that. Keep playing on your targets. Remember, they can only damage you if they are not moving and facing you. Dodge as many skill shots as you can, and whenever they get into that close range and they turn to fight you, this is your opportunity to Great Combustion. and you can ran a great combustion against a squishy range class. The Gattle's pretty much one. So if you're looking for a melee class that combines the burst damage of a caster with the sustained left clicking of a warrior, then look at the Pyromancer, and go burn people. Hope you enjoyed the Pyromancer Hero Spotlight, and this is Arl, signing out.